I never expected her to remember my name, let alone notice when I stopped coming around. It wasn't anything special at first, just Thursday evenings at my friend Hamza's house. We used to study there during university exams because his place was quieter than the hostel. Same sofa, same chipped wooden table, same faint smell of detergent and cardamom tea drifting from the kitchen. After Hamza moved to Canada, I told myself I wouldn't come back. But 2 weeks later, I found myself standing outside their gate anyway, holding a book he had forgotten to return to the library. That was the excuse I settled on. She opened the door before I knocked twice. Oh, she said, like she had been expecting someone but wasn't sure who. Then she smiled softly. Kumain, Ayan. It surprised me that she remembered. Most people didn't. The house felt larger without Hamza. Quieter. Even the ceiling fan sounded louder, ticking as it turned. She asked if I wanted tea the way people ask out of habit, already walking toward the kitchen before I answered. I sat where I always used to sit, the edge of the sofa, back straight, hands resting awkwardly on my knees. Her voice came from the kitchen. You still take it without sugar, right? I blinked. Yeah. I don't know why that stayed with me. Maybe because nobody else remembered small things about me anymore. Not since university ended. Not since friends scattered into jobs, cities, marriages, new lives I only watched through muted Instagram stories. She returned with 2 cups. Steam rose between us. She didn't sit across from me. She sat beside me, leaving just enough space to feel intentional. So, she asked gently, how is life treating you? People ask that all the time. Usually they don't wait for the answer. I shrugged. It's fine. She nodded like she understood what fine meant when it really meant nothing was wrong, but nothing felt right either. We drank tea mostly in silence. Outside, a motorcycle passed. Somewhere a dog barked. The clock in the hallway ticked loudly enough to fill gaps in conversation. Her hands rested around the cup, fingers slightly curled. I caught myself looking at them longer than I should have. The faint lines near her knuckles, a thin gold ring she still wore even though Hamza once told me his father had died years ago. I looked away quickly and folded a napkin on the table, creasing it again and again without realizing. You've gotten quieter, she said. I laughed awkwardly. I think I was always quiet. No, she said softly. You used to argue with Hamza about movies. I didn't remember that version of myself. She did. That was the first strange thing. The second was how easy it felt to stay longer than necessary. I kept thinking I should leave, but every time I stood up, she asked another small question about work, about whether I was eating properly, about my mother's health. Normal questions, but asked slowly, carefully, like they mattered. When I finally reached the door, she walked me out. The evening air was cool, carrying the smell of distant rain. You can come by sometimes, she said, almost casually. The house feels empty now. There was a pause after that word. Empty. I nodded. Yeah, maybe. Our eyes met for a second too long. Not uncomfortable, just aware. I left before I could understand why my chest felt tight. That night, I lay awake scrolling through old chats I never replied to, typing messages I erased before sending. My phone stayed mostly silent like it usually did, until close to midnight. A notification lit the room. A message from her. You forgot your hoodie here. I stared at the screen, because I hadn't worn a hoodie that day. And somehow, I knew she knew that too. I went back the next evening to return the hoodie I never lost. I told myself it was easier than explaining over text. Easier than thinking about why she messaged me at midnight. She opened the door almost immediately again, like she had been near it already. Oh, good, she said, relief slipping into her voice before she hid it behind a smile. I thought maybe you wouldn't come. I handed her the hoodie. She held it for a moment without looking at it, then stepped aside. Stay for dinner, she said. Not a question. The house smelled like onions frying and fresh coriander. Something warm, familiar. The kind of smell that belongs to families, not visitors. I followed her into the kitchen instead of the living room this time. Can I help? I asked. She hesitated, then handed me a knife. Cut these. We stood side by side at the counter, chopping vegetables in uneven rhythm. Our elbows brushed once. Neither of us moved away immediately. So, Hamza calls often? I asked. She smiled faintly. Every Sunday. Exactly 8 minutes. A small laugh escaped her. He talks fast, like he's apologizing for leaving. The knife slowed in my hand. Do you miss him? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she rinsed rice under running water, watching it swirl. I miss being needed, she said quietly. That's different. The honesty landed softly but heavily. I nodded, pretending to focus on cutting tomatoes, though I'd already finished. She wiped her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. You understand that, don't you? I wasn't sure how she knew. Maybe it was obvious, the way I lingered, the way I didn't rush back to anywhere else. I guess, I said. After university, everyone just moved on. You realize you were only part of people's lives temporarily. She studied me then, not pitying, just listening. That must feel lonely. I shrugged, but my throat tightened. You get used to it. She shook her head gently. People shouldn't have to get used to that. We ate at the small dining table. No television, just the sound of spoons against plates and occasional comments about the food being too salty or not spicy enough. Normal conversation, except it didn't feel normal. At one point, she laughed at something I said, really laughed, and instinctively touched my arm. Just for a second. Her hand lingered half a heartbeat longer than necessary before she pulled it back. The air shifted. I suddenly became aware of everything. The age difference, the empty chair where Hamza used to sit, the framed family photos watching from the wall. I imagined what people would think. My friend's mother, a woman old enough to know better, a man young enough to misunderstand kindness. I cleared my throat. I should probably head out. She nodded, but didn't stand immediately. Instead, she gathered the plates slowly, as if stretching time. At the door, she handed me a small container. Leftovers, she said. You look like someone who forgets to eat properly. I smiled awkwardly. You noticed that too. I noticed more than I say. Our eyes met again, longer this time, steady and unguarded. Before I left, she adjusted the collar of my shirt absent-mindedly, like a mother would, except her fingers paused near my shoulder, uncertain, almost shy. Neither of us spoke. I walked home carrying the warm food container, feeling strangely lighter and heavier at the same time. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that evening, visiting her stopped feeling accidental. I didn't plan it. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Somehow my walks ended near her street. My evenings stretched just long enough to justify stopping by. Sometimes I brought fruit. Sometimes nothing. She never asked why I came so often. She just opened the door. It became routine. Tea at sunset. Quiet conversations. Small complaints about work, the weather, the price of vegetables. Ordinary things that slowly stopped feeling ordinary. One evening, rain started suddenly, heavy enough to flood the streets within minutes. I was already inside when the electricity went out. The house fell into darkness. She lit a candle in the kitchen. Soft yellow light moved across her face, changing everything. Softer edges, slower movements. The ticking clock sounded louder without electricity humming in the background. Looks like you're stuck here, she said. I nodded, pretending to check my phone even though there was no signal. We sat closer than usual, both drawn toward the small circle of candlelight. Outside, rain hit the windows in steady waves. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. A strand of hair fell near her face, and she tucked it back absent-mindedly. I watched the gesture longer than I should have. She noticed. Her smile faded just slightly. What? She asked. Nothing. Too quick. She looked down at her tea instead. You've been quiet today. I wanted to say because I think about you when I shouldn't. Instead, I shrugged. Just tired. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. Like both of us were waiting for something unnamed to pass. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Hamza. Bro, you still visit my place sometimes. Mom says you help her with things. My chest tightened. I locked the phone immediately. She must have noticed a change in my face because she asked, gently, everything okay? Yeah, I said. Just Hamza. Her hands stilled around the cup. Oh, that single word carried weight. Awareness. A boundary suddenly visible. She stood up and moved toward the window, watching the rain instead of me. I don't want people to misunderstand, she said quietly. Not accusing, not cold, just careful. I know, I replied quickly. Too quickly. The distance between us felt wider, even though we stood only a few steps apart. I hated that feeling. I come because I started, then stopped. Because what? Because I'm lonely. Because you're kind. Because the house feels like somewhere I belong. None of it sounded safe. She turned back toward me, searching my face as if she needed clarification I couldn't give. For a moment, neither of us moved. The candle flickered. Thunder rolled somewhere far away. I stepped closer without deciding to. She didn't step back. Her eyes dropped briefly to my mouth, then lifted again, uncertain, questioning. Her breath slowed. Mine did too. Everything felt suspended. Too quiet. Too close. My hand lifted slightly, almost reaching her arm. Almost. Then headlights flashed through the window as a car passed outside, breaking the moment. Reality rushing back in. She blinked first and took a small step away. I should make more tea, she said, though both cups were still full. I nodded, stepping back as well. Neither of us mentioned what almost happened, but the air had changed, and for the first time since I started coming there, I wondered if we had already crossed something invisible, even without touching at all. I tried staying away after that night. 3 days. Long enough for the routine to feel broken. Long enough for evenings to stretch empty again. I ate takeaway food standing in my kitchen, scrolled through my phone without reading anything, almost messaged her twice and deleted it both times. On the 4th day, she texted, "Are you okay? Haven't seen you." Simple. Casual. Still, my chest tightened. I told myself I'd stop by just for a few minutes. She suggested a walk instead. The neighborhood park was nearly empty, washed clean after recent rain. Street lights hummed overhead. Wet benches reflected pale yellow light. Somewhere nearby, children's laughter faded as families headed home. We walked side by side without touching, our steps slightly out of sync. "You disappeared," she said gently. "I didn't want to bother you." She stopped walking. "You've never been a bother." I nodded, but kept looking ahead. The gravel crunched under my shoes. Words pressed against my throat, unsure how to exist outside my head. We sat on a bench near the edge of the park. A stray cat crossed the path, pausing briefly before disappearing into bushes. She folded her hands in her lap, fingers tightening around each other. "Hamza asked about you again," she said. "He's happy you still visit." The sentence landed wrong. I laughed quietly. "Yeah, I'm a good friend, I guess." She turned toward me. "That's not what I meant." Silence stretched. I stared at the ground. "People would think it's strange." "People think many things," she replied, "but they wouldn't be wrong." The words slipped out before I could soften them. Her shoulders stiffened slightly. "You think I don't know that?" she asked, not angry, just tired. "I'm not naive." I immediately regretted it. "I didn't mean, I know what this looks like," she continued softly. "A woman my age, spending evenings with a young man who should be building his own life." She laughed faintly, but there was no humor in it. "I keep telling myself it's harmless. Just company." Her voice lowered. "But lately, I'm not sure I believe that anymore." My heartbeat quickened. The air felt thinner. I watched her profile under the streetlight, the faint lines near her eyes, the way she avoided looking directly at me now. "I try not coming," I admitted. "I thought distance would fix whatever this is." She finally looked at me. And did it. I shook my head. "No." The honesty surprised both of us. Her gaze softened, almost relieved, almost afraid. "You make the house feel alive again," she said quietly. "And that scares me." I swallowed. "You make me feel less invisible." The words hung between us, fragile and exposed. Neither of us moved for several seconds. Her hand rested on the bench between us, close enough that I could see the slight tremble in her fingers. Slowly, almost unconsciously, my hand moved closer. Not touching, just there. Breathing felt louder. The world narrowed to the space between our hands. She looked at them, then at me. I yawned. She whispered, my name sounding different this time, heavier. A warning, or an invitation. I leaned forward slightly before I could think better of it. She didn't pull away. The distance closed. One more inch, and everything would change. Her breath caught, and then she asked, barely audible, "What are we doing?" I didn't answer her question. Not really. The moment stretched too long, fragile enough to break under a single honest word. I felt it. The pull forward, the quiet permission in her eyes, the dangerous relief of finally not pretending. And then she stood up. Too quickly. We should go, she said, brushing invisible dust from her clothes. It's getting late. The shift was immediate, gentle but firm, like someone carefully closing a door before it slammed. I followed her out of the park without speaking. Our shoulders almost touched once. Then she adjusted her pace just enough to keep distance between us. At her gate, she paused. Thank you for the walk, she said politely. Not cold, just careful again. The warmth from earlier had retreated behind something guarded. I nodded. Yeah, good night. She smiled, the same familiar smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The door closed softly. I stood there longer than necessary, staring at the light under the doorway until it switched off. The next few days felt strange. No messages. No casual come by if you're free. I passed her street once and kept walking. Told myself it was respect, or maturity, or fear. Probably all three. On the fifth evening, Hamza called me unexpectedly. Bro, I talked to Mom today, he said cheerfully. She's been busy lately. Busy? I asked. Yeah, some old family friends visiting. Also, I think my uncle is trying to convince her to consider remarriage. The word landed heavily. Remarriage. I forced a neutral tone. Oh, she won't do it, he laughed. She's stubborn. But still, family pressure, you know. I murmured agreement, while something inside me tightened quietly. After the call ended, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Of course there were parts of her life I didn't belong to. Conversations happening without me. Decisions forming elsewhere. I typed a message. Hey, haven't seen you. Everything okay? I erased it. Typed again. I missed, deleted. What right did I have to miss her? We never named anything. That night, I walked past her house again. The lights were on. Voices inside. Unfamiliar laughter. Deeper male voices mixed with hers. Curtains drawn halfway. I slowed unconsciously. For a second, I imagined knocking. Imagined her opening the door, surprised but relieved. Imagined everything continuing the way it had before. But the image felt selfish. I kept walking. Days passed. Her chair at the dining table existed only in memory now. Evening tea became instant coffee alone in my apartment. My phone stayed silent except for work notifications and random promotions. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. One night, close to midnight, I opened our chat again. The last message was still hers. You forgot your hoodie here. I typed slowly. Were we about to make a mistake, or were we just honest for once? My thumb hovered over send. Outside, a motorcycle passed. Somewhere a dog barked. The same ordinary sounds as always. I stared at the screen for a long time, then locked the phone. The message remained unsent, and the space beside me felt strangely occupied by everything we never said. 2 weeks passed before I saw her again. Not planned, not prepared, just ordinary coincidence, the kind that feels intentional afterward. I was leaving a small grocery store near her street, balancing a bag of vegetables I barely knew how to cook, when I noticed her standing near the fruit stall outside. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just quieter, like someone who had been thinking too much. For a moment, I considered turning away, but she saw me first. I yawned. My name landed gently between us. I walked over, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands, my voice, my face. E. We stood there awkwardly, surrounded by people choosing oranges and bargaining over prices. Everyday noise wrapped around something fragile neither of us knew how to begin. You disappeared, she said softly. I almost laughed. I thought you wanted space. She nodded slightly. Maybe I did. A pause. Then she added, but silence feels heavier than I expected. We walked together without discussing it, ending up at her gate again, the same place where everything had once felt simple. She hesitated before unlocking the door. Do you want tea? She asked. The question carried history now. I nodded. Inside, nothing had changed. Same ticking clock. Same curtains filtering evening light. Yet the air felt cautious, like both of us understood this moment mattered. She moved around the kitchen preparing tea, movements slower than usual. I leaned against the counter, watching steam rise from the kettle. I almost sent you a message, I admitted. She smiled faintly. I wrote many. Neither of us asked why they weren't sent. She handed me a cup. Our fingers brushed briefly. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately, but neither of us held on either. We sat at the table, not beside each other, not far apart. Careful distance. I need to say something, she began. Her voice trembled slightly, though her expression stayed calm. What happened between us, it wasn't nothing. I nodded, heart steady but heavy. But, she continued, choosing each word slowly. I started depending on you in ways that scared me. Not because of you, because of myself. She looked down at her tea. I forgot how lonely I was until you came. And when I realized that, I felt guilty. You deserve a life moving forward, not waiting inside someone else's unfinished one. The honesty didn't hurt the way I expected. It felt clear. I wasn't trying to replace anything, I said quietly. I just didn't feel invisible when I was here. Her eyes softened immediately. I know. Silence settled, warm instead of tense. I took a breath. The choice sat plainly in front of me now. Hold on, or let it be what it was. I think I started wanting more, I admitted. And I didn't know if that was real, or just two lonely people finding comfort. She nodded slowly, relief and sadness mixing together. Maybe both. We sat there absorbing the truth neither of us could avoid. No dramatic heartbreak. No grand confession. Just recognition. She reached across the table and lightly placed her hand over mine. Steady, grateful. Not romantic. Not distant. Human. Thank you, she said. I squeezed her hand once before letting go. Yeah, I replied softly. Okay. And for the first time since all of this began, the word actually felt like an answer. Months passed before anything resembled certainty. Not dramatic months, just ordinary ones. Summer faded into cooler evenings. My routine changed. New work hours, fewer late walks, more mornings that began with black coffee instead of instant noodles. Life quietly rearranged itself the way it always does when you stop waiting for something to happen. I didn't visit her house every week anymore. Sometimes 2 weeks passed, sometimes 3, and, strangely, that made the moments we did meet feel lighter. Less urgent, more real. The first time it felt different was a Sunday morning at 8:47 a.m. I remember the time because she laughed when I checked my phone. You still notice small things, she said, placing tea in front of me. We were sitting at her dining table again, but the air had changed. No tension hiding in pauses. No querfeleboidens. Just two people sharing space without asking what it meant. Hamza called while we were there. She answered on speaker, smiling easily as she told him I'd stop by. No hosetaschen. No secrecy. After the call ended, she looked at me thoughtfully. It feels simpler now, she said. It did. We no longer filled loneliness for each other. We simply chose company. Our walks returned to the same park bench where everything once almost collapsed under unspoken feelings. Now we sat there talking about ordinary things, grocery prices, bad movies, my work frustrations, her attempts to learn gardening. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. The silence no longer felt dangerous. One evening, as the sun lowered behind the trees, she nudged my shoulder lightly. You stopped trying to impress me, she said. I smiled. I think I stopped being afraid. She nodded, understanding more than I explained. Time had done something neither of us forced. The urgency softened into trust. The guilt faded into acceptance. We weren't escaping loneliness anymore. We were building something slower, steadier. One night, as I stood to leave, she handed me a familiar hoodie. You actually forgot this one, she said. I laughed. You sure? She held my gaze amused. This time, yes. At the door, neither of us rushed goodbye. I reached for her hand naturally, without thinking, without hesitation. She squeezed back, warm, certain. No question left hanging. Just quiet agreement. Life didn't become perfect. We still had awkward days. Moments of doubt. Conversations about age, about expectations, about how people might see us. But those talks happened openly now, over tea that rarely went cold anymore. We learned each other slowly, not as comfort, not as escape, but as choice. And somehow, the house no longer felt empty. Neither did I. Sometimes, late in the evening, we sit by the window watching the streetlights turn on one by one. She reads. I scroll through my phone. Our shoulders touch without announcement. Nothing cinematic, nothing dramatic. Just peace earned through hesitation, distance, and returning anyway. I once thought love arrived loudly, with certainty, with fireworks, with answers. But with her, it felt quieter than that, like recognizing a place you didn't know you were searching for. And every now and then, when she refills my tea before I ask, she smiles the same way she did the first night I came back after Hamza left, as if she remembers everything. And maybe that's what stayed with me the most. We never crossed a line. We simply walked toward the same side of it, together.